What if I told you that the number sitting in your XRP wallet right now, whatever it is, puts you ahead of more people than you have ever imagined? And what if the exact cutoff for the top 10% of all XRP holders globally is a number you might already be sitting on or just a few purchases away from crossing? Tonight, we are going to break down the real wallet distribution data from the XRP Ledger, the actual on-chain numbers, not estimates, not guesses, and show you precisely where you stand relative to every other holder on the network right now. This is the video that changes how you think about your position, because most people in this space are making decisions based on how far they are from whales. What they should be doing is measuring how far they already are above the majority. And the gap between those two framings is the difference between feeling behind and understanding that you are already ahead. There is a number in this video, a specific threshold tied to the top 1%, that I want you to stay for, because it is the number that shocks almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Stick with me until we get there. Before we go further, this is not financial advice. Nothing here is a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any asset. This is educational analysis of publicly available on-chain data. Always do your own research and consult qualified professionals before making any financial decisions. If this kind of data-driven breakdown is what you come here for, hit the like button right now before we even start. It is the fastest way to tell the algorithm this content is worth putting in front of more people. And subscribe with notifications on, because the wallet distribution numbers are shifting as more people enter the market, and the next time these thresholds move significantly, I will have the update ready the same day. Let's get into the real data. Let me start by establishing the full picture of how many people we are actually talking about, because you cannot understand where you rank without knowing the size and shape of the field you are ranking in. As of April 2026, the XRP Ledger has surpassed 7.85 million activated wallet addresses. That is the number of wallets that have met the minimum 10 XRP reserve requirement to be active on the ledger, meaning these are wallets with real committed capital in them, not dust or spam addresses. But here is the important distinction. Those 7.85 million on-chain wallets do not represent 7.85 million unique people. A significant portion of XRP is held on centralized exchanges, Binance, Coinbase, UPbit, Kraken, where millions of individual users share custody under a single exchange wallet address. When you account for all of those off-chain holders, the estimated total number of unique XRP owners globally sits between 18 and 25 million people. That is the real denominator. Not 7 million, not 6 million. Somewhere between 18 and 25 million unique individuals around the world hold XRP right now, and that number tells you something critical before we even look at the distribution. For an asset with this level of genuine global utility and institutional adoption momentum, 18 to 25 million holders is still extraordinarily early. Bitcoin has over 100 million holders. Gold has exposure across billions of people through funds and physical holdings. XRP at 25 million maximum holders is at the stage that Bitcoin was in roughly 2016 and 2017, before the institutional wave, before the ETF era, before the mainstream recognition. Comment 18 to 25 million below. If this is the first time you have seen the actual global holder estimate put in context against Bitcoin and gold, because I think a lot of people in this community have never framed it that way, and it changes the conversation completely. Now let me give you the wallet distribution breakdown, because this is where the data starts to directly tell you where you stand. On-chain data from the XRP Ledger shows the following distribution across the approximately 7.53 million activated wallets that have been analyzed. The single largest group, approximately 45% of all wallets, holds between 1 and 100 XRP. This is the majority of the network by wallet count. These are beginners, casual holders, people testing the technology, people who received a small amount and never added to it. If you hold more than 100 XRP, you are already above the largest single category of wallets on the entire network. Let me say that again because it is important. 100 XRP puts you past the most crowded tier on the XRP Ledger. Approximately 22% of wallets hold between 100 and 1,000 XRP. This is a much smaller group, and it is also where most people who consider themselves regular XRP investors tend to sit. If you are in this range, you are already in the upper half of the network by wallet count. 17% of wallets hold between 1,000 and 10,000 XRP. This is where the crowd starts to thin significantly. You are moving into the committed investor tier, people who have made a deliberate decision to build a meaningful position and have followed through on it. 10% of wallets hold between 10,000 and 100,000 XRP. This is where you start entering the top quarter of the network. Approximately 4% of wallets hold between 100,000 and 1 million XRP, and less than 2% of wallets hold more than 1 million XRP. These are the large institutional addresses, exchange cold wallets, and the original early adopters who accumulated at fractions of a cent. That is the full distribution. 45% of the network is below 100 XRP, 67% is below 1,000, 84% is below 10,000. The field is much more bottom-heavy than most XRP holders realize, and understanding that shape is the foundation for understanding your own position accurately. Now let me give you the specific threshold numbers, and this is the section where I told you to stay for that one number, so here it is. To be in the top 10% of all XRP holder wallets on the XRPL, the current threshold is approximately 2,200 to 2,500 XRP, not 10,000, not 50,000. Somewhere between 2,200 and 2,500 XRP places you in the top 10% of the entire network by wallet count. Think about what that means in dollar terms at a current XRP price near 135. 2,500 XRP represents an investment of approximately $3,275 at today's price. That is a figure that is within realistic reach for a significant number of people. Not a whale position, not an institutional allocation, but the kind of accumulation that a disciplined retail investor can build toward through consistent purchases over time. To be in the top 5%, the threshold rises to approximately 7,700 XRP, roughly $10,400 at current prices. Still not a number that requires wealth. It requires consistency and patience. And now, the number I told you to stay for. To be in the top 1% of all XRPL wallet addresses, the current threshold is approximately 46,400 XRP. At 135 per XRP, that represents approximately $62,600. That is not a number available to everyone. But it is also not the millions that most people assume when they hear top 1% of XRP holders. It is a car. It is a down payment on a house in many cities. It is the kind of number that serious long-term investors accumulating over multiple years can realistically target. And here's what that number actually means. If you hold 46,400 XRP today, you are in the top 1% of every individual wallet on the XRP Ledger, sitting above 99% of the entire network. Now let me give you the tier framework that makes this actionable, because understanding where the thresholds are is only useful if you have a mental model for navigating between them. Using the taxonomy that institutional researchers and on-chain analysts apply to the XRPL ecosystem, the holder tiers break down as follows. The plankton tier is wallets below 500 XRP, approximately 5.2 million wallets, representing the vast majority of the network. The shrimp tier is 500 to 5,000 XRP, approximately 1.8 million wallets. This is where you transition from casual participant to committed retail holder. The crab tier is 5,000 to 25,000 XRP, approximately 620,000 wallets. High conviction retail investors who have made a deliberate and sustained commitment to building a position. The fish tier is 25,000 to 100,000 XRP, approximately 145,000 wallets. This is the early adopter retail category, the people who accumulated before widespread institutional recognition and built positions that will be viewed as extraordinarily well-timed if adoption accelerates as the institutional data suggests. And the dolphin tier is 100,000 to 1 million XRP, approximately 72,000 wallets. High net worth individuals and small institutional funds. What is important about this framework is the relative scarcity at each level. There are 5.2 million plankton wallets. There are 72,000 dolphin wallets. The ratio between the largest category and the fifth largest category is more than 70 to 1. The network is overwhelmingly weighted toward the bottom, and every step up the tier ladder represents a dramatically smaller community of holders. Drop a comment right now and tell me which tier you are currently in: plankton, shrimp, crab, fish, or dolphin. I want to see the full distribution of this community because I think the number of people watching this who are already in the crab tier and above without fully realizing how far that puts them is significant. Here is why these tiers matter beyond the psychological satisfaction of knowing where you rank. The supply math is the mechanism that converts positioning today into advantage tomorrow. And I want to walk you through it precisely because this is the piece most people in the XRP community have heard referenced without ever having it explained with the actual numbers. XRP has a fixed maximum supply of 100 billion tokens, Of that, Ripple Labs holds approximately 42 to 46% in escrow under a programmatic release schedule, 1 billion XRP per month. That supply is not available for immediate market purchase. It flows into the market on a known schedule, but it does not represent a pool of tokens waiting to be bought. The top 50 addresses on the entire ledger, exchanges, institutions, and large entities, control approximately 44% of circulating supply. The remaining 56% is distributed across millions of smaller wallets. Now here's the critical number: the total circulating supply that is genuinely liquid, available for purchase through exchanges and OTC desks at any given moment, has been estimated at between 1 and 2 billion XRP by institutional supply analysts tracking OTC inventory, not 61 billion, not even 10 billion. 1 to 2 billion tokens at any given time represent the actual available supply that all buyers, retail, institutional, and ETF creation, are competing for simultaneously. When XRP ETFs recorded 119.6 million in weekly inflows just last week, that capital was competing for tokens from a pool estimated at 1 to 2 billion. When the institutional flip that the 13F data is beginning to show accelerates, and 65% of institutional allocators have told researchers they have been waiting on regulatory clarity to deploy capital, the demand flowing into that 1 to 2 billion liquid float is not a gentle increase. It is a step function. And the people who hold their tier positions through the accumulation phase do not need to compete for that supply at the moment it matters most. They already own it. Now let me connect the tier framework directly to the adoption timeline. Because the question people always ask is not just where I rank today, but what does my rank today mean if adoption actually happens? Let me walk you through the math precisely. The XRP Ledger currently processes record-level daily payments above 2.7 million transactions. Tokenized asset value on the ledger grew over 35% in the past month alone. 25% of institutional investors surveyed by Coinbase and Ernst & Young plan to add XRP to their portfolios in 2026, on top of the 18% already holding. Goldman Sachs has the largest institutional 13F filing in XRP ETF vehicles of any Wall Street firm. 7-spot ETFs with combined AUM approaching $2.5 billion are active and absorbing supply through OTC mechanisms. The infrastructure for the demand wave is not being built. It is already operational. The demand itself is in the early accumulation phase of the institutional cycle. Here is how this connects to your tier. When the next significant wave of retail adoption arrives, when XRP becomes a topic in mainstream financial media, when ETF AUM crosses thresholds that trigger mandatory allocation reviews at pension funds and endowments, when the Clarity Act makes commodity status permanent federal law, new investors entering the market at that moment will be competing for whatever supply is available at whatever price the market is clearing. The person accumulating at the shrimp tier today, building toward the crab threshold at 5,000 XRP, is building that position at prices that new entrants at the adoption peak cannot replicate. Not because the price has to go to any specific level, but because the combination of entry price and position size available today will simply not be available at a later stage of the adoption curve. This is not a projection. It is basic market mechanics applied to an asset with a fixed supply and a documented, accelerating institutional demand curve. Let me give you the practical accumulation framework, because the data we have covered is only valuable if it translates into a clear strategy for what to do next. The first principle is milestone targeting. Instead of looking at the full distance from where you are to where you want to be, break it into the specific tier thresholds the data identifies. If you are currently holding 200 XRP, your first milestone is the 500 mark, the lower edge of the shrimp tier. If you are at 800 XRP, your milestone is reaching 2,200, the threshold that places you in the top 10% of all XRPL wallets. If you are already in the crab tier between 5,000 and 25,000 XRP, your milestone is the fish tier entry at 25,000, the early adopter retail classification that approximately 145,000 wallets out of the entire 7.85 million currently occupy. Each milestone is a concrete, verifiable step on the ledger. Each one moves you past a meaningful percentage of the network, and each one is significantly more achievable than the psychological anchor most people use, the whale threshold, which at 1 million XRP and above represents less than 2% of wallets. The second principle is consistency over timing. The people in the fish and dolphin tiers today did not get there through a single perfect trade. They got there through repeated, disciplined accumulation over multiple market cycles. buying during the quiet periods when XRP was not generating headlines, and holding through the volatile periods when short-term fear created the dips that made those purchases look obvious in hindsight. The third principle is understanding what you actually own. Your XRP is not just a price chart position. It is a recorded balance on a distributed ledger maintained by thousands of independent nodes across dozens of countries, a mathematical claim on a fixed supply asset that is simultaneously developing institutional ETF infrastructure, a NASDAQ-listed treasury company, commodity classification under U.S. federal law, and integration into global payment systems. Understanding the full architecture of what you hold is what creates the conviction to stay in the right tier when the market tests your patience. Here's the complete picture I want you to take from this video. There are between 18 and 25 million XRP holders globally. 45% of all XRPL wallets hold less than 100 XRP. 67% hold less than 1,000 XRP. The top 10% threshold is approximately 2,200 to 2,500 XRP at current distribution, a number reachable through consistent accumulation, not whale capital. The top 5% threshold is approximately 7,700 XRP. And the top 1% threshold, the number I told you to stay for, is approximately 46,400 XRP, worth roughly $62,600 at today's price. These thresholds are not fixed. As more people enter the XRP ecosystem, the amount required to maintain each percentage position will rise. The person accumulating toward the top 10% threshold today is doing so at a cost that will not be available when mainstream adoption creates the demand wave that the institutional data is building toward. Where you rank today is not your final answer. It is your starting point. And every step up the tier ladder, every purchase that moves you from plankton to shrimp, from shrimp to crab, from crab toward fish, is a step that positions you ahead of a larger and larger share of the network before the adoption curve shifts the cost of each step permanently upward. If this video changed the way you think about your position, if you went from feeling behind to understanding that you are already ahead of the majority, smash the like button right now. You stayed for the full breakdown and you have the complete picture. Share this with one person in your network who is sitting on an XRP position and has never thought about it in terms of where they actually rank. Because the tier framework we covered today is the most honest reframe of XRP positioning I know of. Subscribe and turn on notifications because the wallet distribution thresholds shift as new holders enter the market, and when the data shows a significant move in any of these tier cutoffs, the update drops here first. Tell me in the comments which tier you are in and what your next milestone target is. I will see you in the next one.